Welcome back to the show. We're talking about China's birth rate and the country's two-child policy. Let's get back to our panel. And I want to go back to Singapore, to Baozhen Luo. And Baozhen Luo, what are some of the social and economic factors that you see in China that could explain why many couples don't want to have?
Well, I think there are three levels of three factors. First, simply demographically speaking, since the implementation of one-child policy, the sheer number of women at their sort of fertile years are declining. And then secondly, I think economic speaking, we talked about the burden of the cost, opportunity cost, the sacrifice in career, the sacrifice in leisure, in other ways of realizing life is considerably high. And the third one, again, culturally, I think through years of propaganda, through years of implementing one-child policy, I think the culture, the norm, social norm toward fertility has gradually shifted. People look for other ways to fulfill life rather than having children, having more than one child than before. So I think another, if I may, as we said earlier, I think when we look at sort of the unwillingness to have children, we often look at as if it's a sort of unanimously agreed family decision. But I think it's more complicated than that. Within the family, I'm sure there are a lot of intergenerational discussion or conflict or arguments between the couples regarding whether they want to have the second child. I think as women, especially women now are, become more engaged in the labor force, and at the same time, women still continue to do a lot of unpaid caregiving. Mm-hmm. It is still sort of the unspoken norm that women, or spoken norm that women are the main caregiver for the child. So all of this just become really, really challenging. Indeed, for women are the one to bear, and women to bear the child, but women will also be the one to assume the responsibility of child rearing, which just made it very, very difficult. So if we look across the sort of across the world, in any societies, as women getting more education to meet the demand for labor force, right, but at the same time, their socioeconomic status and cultural status are not elevated, those society, the fertility rate usually very, very low.
Those are great points you raised. I'll get to you in a moment, Song. I just want to go to Wang Feng and talk about those issues that Baozhen Luo just raised. Of course, this is a changing world. China is experiencing a great deal of change, and in fact, China is leading much of the changes that we see around the world. Women are marrying later. They are focusing on developing their careers. So what impact is this kind of urbanization and the fast-paced economic development that we see in China, how is that impacting the country's ability to have more children?
Well, I think here it's useful to bring in actually two neighbors of China in East Asia, that is Japan and South Korea. Between 2000 and 2015, the share of women in urban areas, urban China, aged 25 to 29, that's late 20s, who are single, the share of single women in this late 20s tripled from something like 8% to more than 25%. So young women are receiving higher education, moving around and taking new jobs, and postponing marriage. Now in Japan, that happened 20 to 30 years ago, and in South Korea, that happened over 10 years ago. So in this whole region in East Asia, you're seeing this rapid economic growth at different time, and then the rapid social change. So there's really this competition between rising economic standard of living, economic development, and also the expectation. So the expectation is also going up very quickly. That's what's happening in China right now. Now, in addition to all the other common constraints for young people to have children, this is a global phenomenon now. More than 50% of the world population are now living in countries where fertility level is below the replacement. Right. Okay. In East Asia, these three countries, and I think Singapore as well, you are seeing a particular culture. That is, parents feel very responsible for their childbearing decisions. So they're very careful. Yep. That's why these strong family societies actually have the lowest fertility, because the parents feel so responsible. So there's a cultural similarity among these societies.
Richard, there was a time when couples had many children because that was their safety net when they grew old. There was no government welfare program or social security program of any kind. It was the children, the number of children that you had. When and how did that change?
Well, it changed in today's fully developed economies during the course of the Industrial Revolution. And it's begun to change in rapidly developing emerging markets today. I mean, the extended family still remains a critical part of old age support in China and indeed throughout East Asia and most of the emerging world. But interestingly, we did a survey at the Global Aging Institute just a year or two ago in 10 East Asian countries. And the very first question in the survey was, who should have primary responsibility for supporting the retired elderly? Should it be government? Should it be former employers? Should it be individuals themselves through their own lifetime savings? Should it be children and other family members? And what was startling was, despite the current reality, which is that the extended family remains important, almost nobody wants it to be that way. And in China, fully 63% of respondents said that government should assume primary responsibility. Less than 10% said that it should be the extended family. Part of the implicit deal in the one-child policy was that, all right, you won't have many children to support you in old age, but the government will assume that responsibility. And I think this is strongly reflected in public opinion. And it's one of the reasons why the government has been moving so rapidly and in many ways so effectively to expand pension coverage with the new rural pension system and the pension system for urban residents. Incredibly, 300 million new workers contributing to pension systems over the past 5 years alone. Something unprecedented in world history.
But is there an imbalance, as Song Zhang was telling us earlier on, we need more people, young people, to be in the workforce to finance those pensions for the old people?
Well, yes. I mean, particularly if pension systems are financed on, forgive the jargon, but what's called a pay-as-you-go basis. Right. In other words, current workers pay directly for current retirees. And this is, in effect, the case in China. Then these systems are highly vulnerable to demographic aging. Right. And the increase in the ratio of retirees to workers, which is why putting in place funded pension systems where benefits are paid out of the return to savings is so critically important for aging societies.
Okay.
In fact, several provinces are already having this kind of difficulties. The payment they receive from those working force is not enough to pay the retirees. So that's why the central government is feeling urgency to encourage people to have more kids.
Okay, Baozhen Luo, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to say that in addition to the remarkable the progress that the Chinese government has made in income support in the form of public pension, universal public pension, for all Chinese elders. I think another area they have made a lot of progress is elder care services. China started tackling this sort of long-term care, specific speaking, and elder care generally speaking, since early 2000s, and they have been experimenting on many different kind of ways of financing elder care support and services, in particular long-term care for those who are impaired or have any kind of disability or cognitive sort of impairment.
Right.
I think a couple of years ago, China experimented on public long-term care insurance in 15 cities across the country, not just in the very wealthy regions, but really in different areas all over the east, the west, the central areas of China. And I think just earlier this year, Shanghai has implemented across the whole city, a city with over 20 million people, universal public long-term care for all elders. And that's very, very remarkable because we only see about 5 or 6 countries in this whole world have public long-term care insurance. And I think that's something worthwhile speaking about.
Zhang, I've got about 30 seconds left. You talked earlier on about your brother-in-law, who's 30 years old, no intention of getting married, let alone have children. Is that because of a gender imbalance in China?
I don't think so. And at least the imbalance between men and women at this moment is not very significant. It is not strong enough to force some young gentlemen to give up the idea of getting married. I think they just are worried that if they get married and have 1 or 2 kids, they will be getting poorer than the people.
So he's got lots of girlfriends, right?
Yes.
Okay, we've run out of time, Richard. Sorry, time's caught up with us. Thanks to all of you for being with us.